Welcome back to this week's episode of The Emily Show. Today, we have quite a lot going on in the law to talk about while the Sarah Boone trial is speeding right along. And by the time this podcast drops, she will probably have already taken the stand in her own defense, and we will be well through the trial. And if you had the Law Nerd app, you wouldn't be missing a minute because it's been a really efficient and well-run trial. It's been lovely to see a trial just going normally and quickly. It's been quite a pleasant change from some of the trials we've covered, and some of those are trials we're going to talk about today, like the Karen Reed case. There are some updates in the Karen Reed case. The ACLU filed an amicus brief. We have rehomed one of the detectives and more. Then we also need to talk about updates in the Menendez Brothers case because some interesting things came out of a press conference that was held in Los Angeles in front of that downtown LA courthouse that I am so well familiar with, and the DA's statements about it. The office has put out a official press release. Again, you know, elections are coming, so I'm not surprised we're hearing quite a lot about it from the current DA right now. And there is a lot of new Diddy news. I am not going to be getting into all of the new Diddy news. There was a swath of new lawsuits filed Sunday night. There's also some new motions in court that we need to talk about and what's going on with those. So we have a lot. Emily, how many times can you say that? A lot. It's not intentional, but a little bit. We should just get into it. And for those of you that have been joining me on our long trial days, glad you're also joining me for the updates in the other cases I'm covering in this podcast and on the Quick Bits. Welcome to The Emily Show. I'm Emily D. Baker, the internet's go-to legal analyst and big fan of the cursey words. I've been a licensed attorney for over 17 years. I'm a former prosecutor, and I break down the legal side of pop culture and entertainment stories we can't stop talking about. We should just get into it. Let's go. A huge thank you to today's sponsor, Factor. Factor makes sure that I am getting lunch during trial, and it is the thing I need the most because covering live trials like the Sarah Boone case is incredibly busy. I only wish that I had Factor when I was still in court day in and day out because I know that I would have felt a lot better. And as we're getting into fall, you can pick their fresh, never frozen, fully cooked meals that are delivered right to your doorstep with all of the cozy fall flavors that you crave. All you have to do is heat and eat. And remember, their meals are dietitian approved, so you know you're getting the nutrition you need, which honestly is something that I struggle to do for myself because I just run out of decision-making energy. With Factor, the decision is easy. Pick the meal, heat it up, and eat. And you can pick from more than 6 different meal preferences, from keto to calorie smart or vegan and veggie. Plus, you can round out your order with smoothies or snacks. So if you were ready to try Factor for yourself, head to factormeals.com/EDB50 and use code EDB50 to get 50% off your first box and 20% off your next month. That's code EDB50 at factormeals.com/EDB50. Let's get back to today's episode. Let's talk about Karen Reed. First up in news that was coming out as I was covering trial on Monday, October 21st. It looks like it came out Sunday, October 20th, is that Brian Tully, one of the supervisors over at the Norfolk DA's office, because they do embed, for lack of a better word, some of their state police into the different DA's branches, has been rehomed, and there is now a job opening in the Norfolk County DA's office for a supervisor. It was released that Detective Lieutenant Brian Tully will no longer serve as unit commander of the State Police Detective Unit assigned with the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office. State Police said in a statement that they recently released. So it's going to be very interesting. And let's go through that entire statement from Ted Daniel over on Twitter, which seems to be where, I don't know, State Police has been releasing a lot of their official statements to reporter Ted Daniel over on Twitter. In the statement released to Ted Daniel over on formerly known as Twitter, the MSP statement about Lieutenant Brian Tully says, Norfolk County State Police Detective Unit Commander update 18 October 2024. The Massachusetts State Police has posted a vacancy for the position of Unit Commander of the State Police Detective Unit assigned to the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office. Colonel Noble has conducted an initial interview and believes this decision is in the best interest of the department's public safety mission. You need an entire new unit, I think, for those that are working with the Norfolk DA's office. I think we just need, if we're gonna have everybody in with the DA's office, which is odd to me to start with, I think maybe after all of this, we just need a bit of an overhaul. Just transfer everybody and maybe just everybody's new. It says the unit commander oversees approximately 20 state troopers who investigate unattended deaths, narcotics, and organized crime, sexual assault and abuse, larceny, and related financially motivated crimes. The unit also includes a digital evidence analysis lab, processes digital evidence such as computers and cell phones from federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies. The position was previously held by Detective Lieutenant Brian Tully, who transitioned to a temporary assignment desk in the Division of Investigative Services desk, because there are so many investigations ongoing, and I believe he was on a bunch of those texts with Trooper Proctor et al., so he has been transferred to a desk. Detective Lieutenant Tully will continue to be available to assist Norfolk County District Attorney's Office with any cases in which he was previously involved. Karen Reed. Detective Lieutenant Tully remains the subject of an ongoing internal affairs investigation. Right. As does just about everyone that was working in this unit. Again, I have said it repeatedly throughout my coverage of the trial. When you have law enforcement investigating, especially serious crimes from within the district attorney's office, some of the checks and balances and separations that I think are needed, this is my opinion from my limited experience working in one district attorney's office, but I can see where when you know everybody, there's a bit too much perhaps of giving people the benefit of the doubt. And when you have the agencies overseeing themselves and working on their own, and then you have the district attorney's office bringing in those cases for filing, it becomes a checks and balance where the DA's office is saying, hey, go back and investigate this. Hey, can you take a look into this? And you're reviewing cases with fresh eyes, not with the people that you're working with every single day. They're not part of your office. And yes, lots of district attorney's offices have district attorney investigators, but they are generally not investigating and charging crimes. They are helping DAs execute search warrants. They are helping support victims and witnesses. They are doing other things within the DA's office, but they are not investigating homicides and bringing it to them. But I worked in a large county where we had the robbery homicide division, we had sheriff's homicide, we had lots of local law enforcement agencies, not just one. So it's a very different and not easily analogous, but this is the first time I've seen that all the homicide investigations start within the DA's office. And if the DAs are part of those investigations, it's really odd to say, hey, this investigation's shit, go back and do it again, because they're a part of it. It's all just a little too close. And I think in investigations and prosecutions, more eyes on and more checks and balances is always a good thing. And I understand that part of what's going on here is that it can be expensive, but it's going to be expensive no matter what. And when I'm talking expensive, I'm not talking Erica Jane. It's expensive to be me. Don't worry. We talked about Tom Girardi and Quick Bits this week. I'm talking about just the security cost for the Karen Reed trial cost the taxpayers of the state of Massachusetts over $258,000. That is for security at the courthouse during the trial. So when we're looking at how much did this trial potentially cost the state, we are looking at everything, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, not just for those testifying. This is for courthouse security. That is it. To have officers at the courthouse, over $258,000 for the trial. That doesn't count everybody who came in to testify. That doesn't count all of the work that went into this investigation. This is just for security for the weeks of trial. The amount of money that is going to be spent if this goes to retrial in January is going to be significant. And when we're looking at whether or not this will go to a retrial, we have to talk about the appeal because the ACLU has filed an amicus brief in this case. Now, sometimes the ACLU's involvement in cases, depending on what cases they are, can be interesting. But in this case, they are filing an amicus brief that's very much in line with what we see from the defense filings. And we are going to take a look at that real quick right now. This was filed on October 16th in the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts. Remember, the Karen Reed appeal on Judge Cannoni's denial of the motion for new trial and or dismissal and or to just interview some of the jurors, please, is set for hearing on November 6th. And hey, if there's an audio feed of it and it can be streamed, we'll stream it. If it can't be streamed, then I'll summarize it. Either way, we're going to talk about it. And the Sarah Boone case will probably be done by then. So, you know, it's a W all the way around. This is their amicus brief, and an amicus brief in sum is just an organization coming in saying, hey, we have an interest in this case and we would like to be heard in support essentially of one side or the other or a position of law. In this case, the ACLU is stepping into this case asking for the court to either grant the new trial and or allow the jurors to be heard from, arguing that the double jeopardy clause of the Constitution requires it and that the granting of a mistrial was hasty. Where have we heard that before? Well, from Karen Reed's defense attorneys. They say in their intro to this that the ACLU Massachusetts is an affiliate with the National ACLU, and they are dedicated to protecting and advancing the civil rights and liberties of all people in the Commonwealth, including those granted by the Constitution and Bill of Rights. They frequently engage in litigation and other advocacy to protect the rights of people involved in the criminal legal system. Here, they say the ACLU takes no position on what the evidence presented at trial did or did not show. Rather, this brief addresses the trial court's decision not to respond to compelling evidence that there was a potential mistake or misunderstanding concerning the outcome of the jury's deliberations and what processes will be employed by trial courts addressing any similar circumstances in the future. They are concerned that the jury was not polled and that the jurors who have come forward are not being heard out when they say they reached a verdict. Their summary of the argument is that appellant Karen Reed faces the possibility of being retried on multiple criminal charges for which numerous jurors now claim they acquitted her. A retrial on acquitted charges would violate the prohibition against double jeopardy, a critical right enshrined in the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution and Massachusetts common law. If the court does not grant the requested relief to dismiss or otherwise preclude the counts on the current record, then this court can and should prevent the potential for injustice by ordering the trial court to conduct an evidentiary hearing to determine whether the jury in her first trial agreed to acquit her on any count, such that it was not manifestly necessary for the trial court to declare a full mistrial. They're saying, look, we need to at least talk to the jurors, and this is what the defense has been arguing about. They go on and list out what has happened in the first trial, which I have covered here over and over and over again. We have rewatched, we have gone to the tape, we have gone to the defense arguments, we have covered this quite fulsomely. But they say the trial court had a clear path to avoid erroneous mistrial. Simply ask the jurors to confirm whether a verdict had been reached on any count. And on this, the ACLU and I completely agree. Look, you could have just asked them. You could have asked them. You could have asked them. And you didn't. And that's what they're arguing here. And they're asking the appellate court to at least, as the most minimum level, allow the jury to be asked, did you reach a verdict on count 1, on count 2, on count 3? And that's what they're asking for here. The trial court had a clear path to avoid an erroneous mistrial. Simply ask the jurors to confirm whether a verdict had been reached on any count. Asking those questions before declaring a mistrial is permitted, even encouraged by Massachusetts rules. Such polling serves to ensure the jury's views are accurately conveyed to the court, the parties, and the community, and that the defendant's related trial rights are secure. It is consistent with a nationwide practice of polling juries to ascertain verdicts, including before declaration of a mistrial. Here, a post-trial evidentiary hearing would serve the same purposes, enabling the trial court to determine whether jurors had actually agreed to acquit appellant on counts 1 and or 3, such that it was not manifestly necessary for the court to declare a full mistrial, just a mistrial on count 2, where it seems the jury was hung. They say that an evidentiary hearing is required to safeguard appellant's rights under double jeopardy. As we have gone through this more, and each time I've covered it, I think the cleanest path forward is to grant the hearing and to ask the jurors. I think that is the cleanest way forward. The Commonwealth has argued vigorously that polling the jurors would invade the province of the jury and would get into their deliberative process. I don't think that it would. They are saying it necessarily asks the next question, then why did you say you were hung? But again, I think it's ambiguous enough because there were multiple subparts to count 2 because of lesser includeds that it was unclear, and that they can be asked if they reached a verdict and not ask them anything further. I don't think you have to ask the next step about, then why did you say that you weren't? Or why didn't you speak up? So I think the granting of the hearing with regard to the jurors is something that happens in quite a lot of cases and is worth asking. This jury sat for 10 weeks. So I am on the side of, if they reached a verdict, they should be heard. They sat for 10 weeks. They seemed to deliberate, but the prosecution has argued, look, the jury was very thorough in its notes. They made very clear notes. So was it really ambiguous? I think it's ambiguous enough that granting a hearing is a safeguard and it doesn't cause any further harm. I think the greater injustice here would be to retry Karen Read on counts where a jury has reached out to the attorneys on both sides and said, no, we reached verdicts. What does that do to the jury system? You sit for 10 weeks in, by all accounts, a tiny and hot AF courtroom to reach a verdict, and then you're unclear on the jury instructions about how to put that verdict to writing, and then it's just declared a mistrial? It's not what the system intends. And I think the result of, well, too bad, isn't the just result here. So for me, I think dismissing it is premature. And I think asking the jury is probably the only result. And notably, we have not seen a single juror come forward to say, no, that's not what happened. We've seen jurors ask for their names to remain sealed for their own security, but we've not seen a single juror come forward and say, no, we didn't. We didn't all come to a unanimous verdict. Not one. So when it gets to hearing in November, I'm curious to see what questions the panel of judges from the Supreme Judicial Court ask, and I'm curious to see how this goes. I hope that they grant a hearing. I don't know if they will. I think under the law that there's room to grant a hearing. I do not think there's any room under the law to just dismiss it. So I think the best outcome the defense can hope for here is to get that hearing and go from there. And speaking of getting hearings, the Menendez brothers are going to be back in court because of their habeas petition, and the renewed interest in their case is no small part of that. Thank you to today's sponsor, Honeylove. Honeylove brings us the bras and shapewear that we don't hate to wear. Why? Because it's comfortable, intuitive, and easy. When I say intuitive, it's because shapewear can be a giant pain when you have to use the restroom, but Honeylove has solved that problem too, so you don't even have to take it off. Whether you are looking at their super power shorts that smooth, shapes, and lifts so you have a flawless silhouette, to their bras that don't roll down in the back and are comfortable to wear even on the longest days, Honeylove has you covered. And Honeylove is more than just sculptwear. It is my absolutely favorite pajamas come from Honeylove, and I wear only Honeylove pajamas at this point, but they also have tanks, leggings, and bodysuits, so you can find what you need and feel confident in it no matter what you have going on. So whether it's a night out, a night in, a long day at work, or a special event, Honeylove has you covered. And I've got you covered with 20% off. So treat yourself to the best bras and shapewear on the market and save 20% at honeylove.com/Menudo. honeylove.com/lawnerd. Use our exclusive link down below to get 20% off, or head to honeylove.com/lawnerd. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about it. Let them know it was the Emily Show. Let's get back to it. You may have seen that the Menendez Brothers family and the victim's family, the Menendez Brothers parents, held a press conference out in front of the Criminal Justice Building in downtown Los Angeles because we are coming up to a hearing for them on their habeas petition. They are asking to either have the case reduced, granted a retrial, or have the case resentenced. I think the resentencing is what the family really wants. I don't think a retrial at this point helps anybody, seeing that they've been in custody for 35 years. So I think the goal is for a retrial. We are going to go through just a little bit of that press conference and then the statement by the current DA, who is up for re-election. Lots of the news is talking about whether or not the interest in this case is coming at this time because of that campaign or because the habeas unit just got to it. This habeas petition was filed over a year ago, and the DA's office kept saying they needed more time to look at it. But we learned some interesting things from one of the family's attorneys, Mark Garagos. No, I'm not saying Gyarados like the Pokemon. Mark Garagos, you may remember, because he is part of the Celebrity Bravo reality reckoning with Bethany Frankel, and he represents Rachel in her lawsuit against Tom and Ariana, and he also represented Scott Peterson at trial. So there's that. So as we go to this press conference, it is where you see quite a lot of these press conferences happen in front of this particular building, which is a very difficult location to have a press conference because there are constantly buses and cars and all of the rest of it going by on a very busy, well, two very busy street. It's the corner, and everybody is sitting there like with their cell phone out trying to record this press conference. This audio was some of the best that I found, and since it is a pod, I am hoping for better audio. So let's see real quick what Mark has to say.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Garagos. I, along with Cliff Gardner, represent Lyle and Eric Menendez. I also have here today Alex Kazarian, Satara Kasim is somewhere, and Tina Glandian, who have been working for the last 18 months in order to get a release for Lyle and Eric Menendez. A couple of weeks ago, and so that you understand the background of it, back in May, we filed a writ of habeas.
So he is getting yelled at by the reporters who are towards the back, who are like, I can't hear, I can't hear. The TV microphones pick him up just fine, but those sitting in the back by the street can't hear him at all. So he's trying to like yell to the back of the room in a wide open spaces, and they can't hear him well, but the TV mics are picking him up fine. So it's frustrating for them because if the TV mics are picking him up, that doesn't project anywhere other than to, you know, us. So the reporters are yelling at him to speak up, and he's like, I don't know what you would like me to do.
Corpus. A judge in this courthouse, Judge William Ryan, issued what's called an informal request for a reply. That informal request for a reply was to ask the DA to respond to the allegations of new evidence.
So in the writ of habeas corpus, the Menendez brothers, say there is new evidence, so it needs to be reviewed for new trial and or a release and or reduction of sentencing. And the judge asked the DA's office, basically, what do you have to say? And so that is what he's talking about now, that the DA's office was asked to reply.
Part of the two prongs of new evidence were, number one, a letter that was found at Marta Cano's house. That was a letter written by Eric fully 8 months before the killings to his cousin Andy.
It's my understanding that that evidence was had prior to the first trial, but was not introduced in the second trial. But when he's talking about the two prongs of new evidence, it's whether this new evidence would garner another trial. That's what he's getting into. Like, is this evidence such evidence that it would garner a new trial? Part of the controversy here is that in the first trial, quite a lot of evidence and discussion of prior sexual abuse at the hands of their father was allowed into the trial. And in the second trial, a lot of that evidence was ruled out. So some of this is going to whether it corroborates the testimony of Lyle and Eric and whether that should have been allowed in the second trial. The first trial, there was a mistrial. The jury couldn't reach a verdict. The second trial, they were convicted.
And Andy testified at the trial. However, in the second trial, was demeaned as making this up or was not true. This letter now shows or corroborates that Andy was telling the truth. The letter describes the abuse. The letter, I believe, was released, at least temporarily, by the DA's office. And anybody who wants it, we can release that as well. The other pillar of the writ of habeas corpus was a declaration by Roy Rossello. The declaration by Roy.
That declaration is new evidence, and someone who was not interviewed at the time, I don't even know if anyone knew that this was somebody who was potentially a victim of the Menendez brothers' father at the time. So this is new evidence that has come forward because of the docuseries.
Rossello is incredibly important for a number of reasons. Number one, Roy Rossello, who was a member or a then member of the band Menudo, was and took great courage at Nuri's finding him and talking to him to sign a declaration that said that he too was assaulted by the father, and not only assaulted, but it happened at the house. The reason that's important is that it corroborates what was testified to in trial number one, that it corroborates the fact that the safe place that Jose thought he had was in the house. It corroborates what the family members said was the very uncomfortable rule in that house, that you could not go down the hallway if Jose was with one of the boys.
Jose, the father.
That was the ground upon which he prayed. We have those two items. Now, there is a separate track. About 3 months ago, we sent a petition, and mind you, the DA's office, there's been those who have said, well, this is election nearing, blah, blah, blah. We filed this in the...
Look, there's lots saying that. So Mark is discounting that in his statements, but there are some saying, well, this is coming up now because of this, but this was filed months ago. So that's what he's getting into now, which is why I brought it up as I made initial comments before we got into this press conference.
DA has been, Mr. Gascon's office has been engaged with us productively, strongly for well over a year. Joan, who you will hear from in about 5 minutes, we actually, because of her young age, she turns 93 next month.
Said she turns 93 next month.
What's a very rare thing done back in December, which is called a conditional examination.
He's going to go and explain a conditional examination, but guess what? So am I. A conditional examination is, I mean, it's not super rare. It's allowed for under the law, but the circumstances have to be appropriate. And it's something that you will see in some of the TV shows. But if someone may not be able to give their testimony because they may not still be with us, the conditional exam allows for their testimony to be preserved as if they were giving their testimony in a trial with a defense attorney, with a prosecutor, and with a court reporter, and take their testimony, even though there's not a trial going on, and preserve it in case they are not able to testify. It happens with people who are, depending on their age, which is why he commented on the fact that she's 93 years old, with people who are terminally ill, with people who've been seriously injured. You can see conditional exams being taken to preserve that testimony and allowed in court as if it were given live in court. It is done, there is a process for it, but it is not commonly done because there are some hurdles for it. And this is being done in consideration of if they are granted a new trial, then they may need this testimony.
To look at the work they have done and resentence them, to support the resentencing. Now, when I
That's
say
the
the
rehabilitation
work they have done,
effort.
Lyle and Eric have started, mind you, since 2005, up until the time that Judge Ryan issued the request for an informal reply, have had no hope of ever getting out. Since 2005, they had exhausted all legal remedies. They had resigned themselves to being in prison for the rest of their lives. You could take two tracks on that. You could either just become a hardcore, irreconcilable recidivist, or you can do what they've done, which is create.
I mean, I guess people, yes, do commit crime within custody, but you can't really, I mean, the concept of recidivism, I think, often goes to being out of custody and committing other crimes. But what he's getting to is the second track is saying, look, they have served time. They have served 35 years. They have been rehabilitated. Please take another look at resentencing, considering the entirety of the history of the record here and considering what they've done while they're in custody. Please consider resentencing them on this case as opposed to granting them a new trial for new evidence, which is what I think they would prefer, honestly, in this circumstance. So he talks about the work they've done in custody, the courses they've been a part of, and the fact that Lyle has graduated from college while in custody.
From the first ever class in June, I watched it, of a combination of UCI along with the Department of Corrections. The first class, Mr. Friedman and I were there, of 22 prisoners who got their BA degree while in prison, and a bunch of them life without parole. So there is an idea that there is redemption. There is an idea with their green space project of rehabilitation. I will tell you, in over 40 years of doing this, I have never seen the amazing, exemplary rehabilitation and mitigation evidence that we have now presented to the DA's office.
And the mitigation evidence is going to
hear from the family today briefly, and I will tell you, I'll give you kind of a coming attraction. I will start with Anna Maria. She will tell you exactly the genealogy. We have over 20 relatives, both Kitty and Jose's sides of the family.
It's unusual to have the victim's side of the family in support. This is a familial crime, but in support of a release like this. It is fairly unique to see the victim's side of the family coming forward and saying, yes, we are all on the same page. However, I'm interested to hear what he says about what the DA's office has had to say about this as we get there.
This is virtually unprecedented in my practice, and I would dare say it anywhere, that 20 family members on both sides, victims, constitutional victims under Marcy's law, are here to urge the DA to resentence. After they're finished speaking to you today, we will then, Mr. Friedman will take them across the street to the Hall of Justice, and they will go through what Gascon
the office
does
buildings at the DA's office
in resentencing, and they will meet with the resentencing unit. They will, under the California Constitution, Marcy's law, they will voice their opinion on why they believe it's time that these gentlemen come home. That they've spent over 35 years, and I've said it once, I've said it twice, if they were the Menendez sisters, they would not be in custody. We have evolved, it's time, and without further ado, I'm going to introduce Anna Maria, who's going to come up and speak.
So before we get to the Q&A portion of this, where there are some questions about the DA's office, real quick, Marcy's law is California's law giving families of victims rights to make sure, and victims' rights to make sure that they are kept within the process. They are updated on the process. They are updated when people are released, and making sure that by law that is done and everyone has a voice. So he's talking about going to the DA's office with all of the family members to meet with the elected DA, which is an option most don't have, but to meet with the elected DA to talk about this. Within the DA's office, this is being processed through their habeas unit and their resentencing unit, because there are two different tracks and there are two different units handling that. As we get into the Q&A, Geragos is talking about the fact that they have set up a meeting over at the DA's office with the LA County District Attorney and is being asked to talk about the DA's office. I thought that this was interesting and gave us some insight beyond the press statements that the DA's office has released, because it's a little insight of the conversations that are happening with the DA's office and Geragos, who's representing the brothers.
Tell you, and I said it before, that the DA's office from 18 months ago has taken this very seriously. And I say that because there are times, whether it's high profile, low profile, that I don't get the feeling that we're being heard. I get the feeling here that we have been being heard. I get the feeling that there is genuine, I think the DA has mentioned in his remarks that there is a division in the office. I understand that. I mean, I get that. But I don't think that there should be any division when you've got a united front of this many family members. And I know somebody had asked me about one of the family members. I would just say I don't want to cast aspersions on anyone. All I will say is think about your own family. Do you think you could get almost unanimous support out of your own family and extended relatives for anything you do? So I'll leave it at that.
What I find interesting about what he said is that the DA's office internally is split on this. I don't think the DA has ever said that publicly, but that does not surprise me that the DA's office divisions might be internally split on this. And that is what the elected DA is telling Mark Geragos. Ultimately, it's the elected DA's prerogative, even if there is a division within the office, to choose to do or not do whatever he may choose to do or not do. There are hearings set for this in early November, and we will likely see a statement from the DA around the time of that hearing if they are going to agree on resentencing, if they're going to submit on that issue, if they're going to oppose it. And I'm not, again, surprised that it's split, because there is quite a lot of information on this case. There were 2 trials, and I can see where there would be argument within the DA's office that these were both adults living out of the home at the time that these murders happened. It was not immediately under duress of a specific event. So I can see where those arguments could and might be happening. So with that, we're going to go to the statement from the district attorney's office that was released after this press conference, and then we will move on. I also realized that I did a terrible job of introing this case, even though I think we talked about it last week on the podcast. But the Menendez case being back in the news, again, it is something that I am so familiar with that I don't always take a step back. But Lyle and Eric Menendez were convicted of murdering their mother and their father and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After their second trial, they were sentenced in the mid-90s. I think their sentencing was in 1995 or 1996. And the interesting thing in the press conference is the family was calling them boys, was talking about the fact that this happened when they were children. However, the murders happened when they were both over the age of 18. So we are going to get to what the DA's office had to say, and I will be keeping an eye on this, as it seems that the resentencing is the most likely outcome given everything that's come forward at this point. The statement from the LA County District Attorney's Office released on October 16th, 2024 says, statement from the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office on the ongoing review of the Menendez brother case from the Media Relations Division. It says, in response to today's news conference by the Menendez brothers' defense and family members, we want to take a moment to express our empathy for all the victims involved in these tragic incidents. It goes on to say, we have heard the heartfelt pleas from the Menendez family regarding the review of this case. While we cannot formally comment on any decisions at this time, please know that our office is dedicated to a thorough and fair process and is exploring every avenue available to our office to ensure justice is served. Our legal team has met with the Menendez brothers' family to listen to their concerns and perspectives. In addition to the habeas filing that is being handled by the office's Writs and Appeals Division, which will be considered by the court, the Menendez brothers' cases are being reviewed by the office's resentencing unit for possible resentencing. While the habeas filing raises questions about the evidence in the previous trials, the resentencing unit focuses on the individual's rehabilitation and behavior during time served. I think that's the right direction. that the office will probably go in. It goes on to say prosecutors are still seeking full documentation of the defense's claims. The office is working as quickly as justice permits. It says, our office has developed a more modern understanding of sexual violence since the Menendez brothers first faced prosecution. Today, our office acknowledges that sexual violence is a pervasive issue affecting countless individuals of all gender identities, and we are committed to supporting all victims as they navigate the profound impacts of such trauma. Our Bureau of Victim Services works tirelessly to provide trauma-informed support to those affected by violence, ensuring that they receive the resources and assistance they need to heal and reclaim their lives. We understand the complexity of these situations and the multitude of emotions that come into play for victims and their families. We will provide updates as new information becomes available. Our office remains steadfast in its commitment to justice and in supporting victims, recognizing that every case is unique and deserving of careful consideration. Thank you for your understanding and compassion as we continue to navigate this sensitive matter. The next court date is scheduled for November 26th. Again, I think we will more likely see a resentencing than we would see a motion for new trial. Rehabilitation is the goal in cases. Then again, there are cases where people are sentenced to life without the possibility of parole because that's what justice requires. We will see how this is navigated. But again, we have seen an outpouring of support from the victim's family asking that there be a resentencing here for Eric and Lyle. And we will see what happens with that. But with such a high profile case and a case that still has people very divided, I think that looking at the way sexual violence is understood, especially when it comes to family sexual violence and violence against men, how it is understood now vis-a-vis how it was understood in the early 90s is a very different thing. And I always think there is room for justice continue to move forward as more is known and as crimes are understood and as trauma is understood. We will see what the office decides to do on this one, but I would be interested in hearing your thoughts on it, whether you remember this case, whether you know about this case, or whether this is the first time you're hearing about this case. But when I talk about trials sometimes not ever being done, this trial was done in the 90s. Then the appeals ran out in the early 2000s. And now in 2024, it is back not only in the news, in the media, but it is also still very much not done. And speaking of cases that feel like they may never be done, even though they have just begun, we have to talk updates on Diddy. Thank you to today's sponsor, Lume. Lume is the whole body deodorant that has you covered from your pits to your parts, your feet, and everything in between. It doesn't matter what you have going on in the day. The solid stick deodorant is formulated to stop odor before it starts for up to 72 hours. And if you've never tried their stick deodorant, now is a perfect time. Not only do I love that it comes in a wide range of scents, but Lume also has body wash that also helps target odor, so you can use them together to knock out odor before it even begins. And what I love is that if you aren't sure what's going to work best for you, you can try their starter pack, which you will get a great discount on if you use our code for today's ad. The starter pack comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, and 2 free products of your choice. I would highly suggest the mini body wash and the deodorant wipes. And with all of that, you get free shipping. And for our listeners who are new customers, you get 15% off all Lume products with our code. And if you combine that with the already discounted starter pack, it equals 40% off in total. Use code LAWNERD for 15% off your first purchase at lumedeodorant.com, or double down those savings with the starter pack. That's code LAWNERD at LumeDeodorant.com. Smell fresher, stay drier from head to toe with Lume. So with regard to the case against Sean Diddy Combs, there are a few things going on in the criminal case and a lot going on in the civil cases, all of the civil cases. You may be seeing headlines that there have been 6 or 7 new lawsuits that have been filed as a part of the group of lawsuits filed by the Busby law firm out of Texas. I don't want to feel like I am an ad for them because they are, one of the not sponsors of it. Lots of sponsors of today's show, but they are one of the not sponsors of today's show. But I think making sure that we're referencing those cases together is helpful context because of the press conference they gave saying that they had over 120 cases that they were likely to bring. I think keeping those in a group or at least referencing them together makes sense. And also knowing that when I covered those cases last episode, the intro to those cases is largely the same. And then we get the specific facts of each case. I am not going to go through the specific facts of all of the new filings today. It is a trial week, and some of them are just flat horrific and involving children. And I am going to go through the legal filings going on in the criminal case and give you a very limited overview of what's going on in those civil cases. In the new civil case filings, there are, at this point of recording, 6 additional new filings. One of them, I believe, happened at the end of last week. 5 more of them happened late on Sunday. There might have been more on Monday, but I did not have a chance to check because of covering trial, but there might have been more filed on Monday. But of those new cases, there are 2 John Does, 3 Jane Does, and one of the Jane Does was a 13-year-old who was at the VMAs in 2000. And the allegations as to that 13-year-old involve absolutely some of the most depraved shit I've seen put into a lawsuit, including multiple people assaulting her and the allegation that she was drugged. This is in the civil case. These are civil allegations. Do I think some of these could end up as a part of the criminal case? Yes, I do think some of these can end up as a part of the criminal case. Some of these allegations in the newer lawsuits run up until the year of 2022, much more recent in time, including the assault of a personal trainer at a BET Awards after party in 2022 and others. So what is notable about some of these lawsuits is they very clearly state that other celebrities were present, other celebrities witnessed some of these things, and though they did not name those celebrities, I think it is a warning that we're going to start seeing those things happening because they may very well be witnesses in these civil cases or defendants themselves in other criminal cases, depending on the case. So other celebrities are not named yet in these, but it is mentioned that other A-list celebrities were present during some of these things. As we're getting into the criminal case, you may have heard that Sean Combs, through his lawyers, filed for the victims' names to be released. What they're really asking for is a bill of particulars with regard to the RICO charges, and we're going to go over that real quickly. The prosecutors asked to have time to respond to that, and the court granted that time. But if you've been following along with the Sarah Boone case, you have heard us talk about bill of particulars before, and in RICO cases, I can understand where it's like, hey, you've said that they did a bunch of stuff. Can you tell us exactly what? This filing is from the defense on October 15th, a letter filing to the judge saying that they are requesting that the government identify its alleged victims so that Combs can prepare for trial and allow the defense counsel to ensure compliance with Local Rule 23.1. And they say, in the footnote, we respectfully move for a bill of particulars under Rule 7F without prejudice to our ability to make additional motions for a bill of particulars with respect to other deficiencies in the indictment. So while the splashy title for this is, we need them to identify the alleged victims, what they're asking for is more particularity in the pleading, saying you've said RICO, but you haven't said everything that you might be bringing forward, and you haven't said who else might be trafficked other than victim 1. The defense says in their opening, this case is unique in part because of the number of individuals levying allegations against Mr. Combs due to his celebrity status, wealth, and the publicity of his previously settled lawsuit. Now, there's no period there, but I'm going to interject saying, and the civil cases alleging that he did the things. So also that, not just because of his status, wealth, and publicity. It goes on to say, and the grand jury leaks and false inflammatory statements by the DHS agents as outlined in our previous motion. They've alleged that the Department of Homeland Security leaked the video to CNN, even though it seemed the government didn't have the CNN video until CNN got it, the video from the Intercontinental in Los Angeles. They continue down that road to say This has had a pervasive ripple effect, resulting in a torrent of allegations by unidentified complainants, spanning from the false to outright absurd. They go on to say yesterday alone, anonymous accusers filed an additional 6 lawsuits, footnote 2, and then they list out the first round of lawsuits that I covered previously, not this latest round of lawsuits. They say counsel for the accusers recently convened a press conference prior to filing, at which he claimed he represented 120 accusers making outrageous and deeply prejudicial allegations, including violent sexual assault and sexual abuse of minors, footnote 3, and then they list the case and they list the news articles. They go on to say this publicity stunt broadcast on Instagram included a 1-800 number that reportedly received 12,000 calls in the first 24 hours. And then they link a article from the New York Post. They say these accusations came on the heels of more than a dozen lawsuits previously filed and currently pending, several of which have already been discredited, but only after irreparably damaging Mr. Combs' character and reputation. I don't know which lawsuits they're talking about that they say have been discredited. That's not what I've seen in covering those lawsuits. They go on to say the swirling allegations have created a hysterical media circus that, if left unchecked, will irreparably deprive Mr. Combs of a fair trial if they haven't already. In light of the number and anonymity of the accusers, on October 7th, Mr. Combs asked the government to identify its alleged victims. Counsel has conferred with the government, who opposes disclosure of alleged victims' names at this stage. I understand why they do. One of the things the government has said repeatedly in this case is they are very concerned about witness harassment and intimidation. And so when it comes to who are the victims coming forward, no, they don't want to specify them because they don't want them to be harassed. So do they have to issue a bill of particulars at this stage? That is going to be litigated. The defense wants more information. The government says we don't have to do that yet. The court's order regarding this was filed on October 18th, stating that the Court of Clerk is directed to terminate the motion because it is granted. The government requests a deadline of October 30th to file its response to the motion for bill of particulars, and the court granted that motion. So we will see a response from the government on October 30th, and then we will see a reply from Sean Combs' counsel in early November. And then in a similar vein, on October 20th, Sean Combs' attorneys filed a letter requesting a gag order. In their letter filing, they say, we write on behalf of our client, Sean Combs, pursuant to Local Rule 23.1 and the 5th and 6th Amendments, to request an order prohibiting further extrajudicial statements from prospective witnesses and their lawyers that substantially interfere with Mr. Combs' right to a fair trial. I think they are assuming that those within some of the civil lawsuits will also be witnesses in this case. So they are hoping to shut down any future press conferences, discussion regarding those civil lawsuits, etc. They go on to say Mr. Combs has a constitutional right to a fair trial free from the influence of prejudicial statements in the press. True. And then they go and cite Shepard v. Maxwell. We talked about that case a lot when we were going through the initial non-dissemination order in the Idaho case with Brian Koberger. And after citing numerous cases, they go on to say, as the court is aware, Mr. Combs has been the target of an unending stream of allegations by prospective witnesses and their counsel in the press. And it goes to the last motion and cites back to the last motion, moving for an order directing the government to identify its alleged victims in the case. To the defense, that's the bill of particulars. They go on to say these prospective witnesses and their lawyers have made numerous inflammatory extrajudicial statements aimed at assassinating Mr. Combs' character in the press. And then they go on to list a number of media headlines. And we know that headlines are often hyper sensationalized, which is not how we do things over here. It's actually what I try to avoid. They have listed things like Diddy's accusers speak out for the first time in the wake of sexual misconduct allegations. This guy got no soul. Billboard, May 29th, 2024. And then they link it. Reporting on accusers calling Mr. Combs sick and a monster with no soul and his behavior disgusting. They also say Diddy indictment imminent, alleged sex trafficking victims attorney claims from TMZ. They say lawyer for an accuser stating Combs is not remorseful for any of his actions and thinks he's invincible. Is this the worst thing the press has said about Diddy? Because I have questions. He thinks he's invincible and is not remorseful. That's what you... Okay. They go on to cite another news article that calls Diddy's apology pathetic, saying that no one will be swayed by his disingenuous words. Continuing on, they say witnesses, lawyers have also vouched for the credibility and character of their clients and opined on potential evidence. This is coming from another TMZ article. Victim one's attorney outraged at river rafting jet photos. Lawyer sends ominous message. 3 exclamation points. And it says the lawyer describing accusers as individuals with limited resources fighting for justice after being marginalized, abused, and exploited by a billionaire, and then commenting on all the atrocities he's caused and has been accused of by countless individuals over the decades. And they go through and talk about the Busby press conference and others. And it is so difficult to read because they have all of the links spelled out and just line after line after line of links and statements calling Diddy things like deplorable. They go on to say, what's more, these lawyers have done the government's work for them, repeatedly vouching for the government and commenting on the strength of the government's case. C.E.G. Diddy indictment imminent, alleged sex trafficking victims attorney claims. Again from TMZ, saying accuser's lawyer opining that Combs knows what's coming down. Well, after the hearing on bail, we know that that's true. He did know from like January. Where's the lie? Quote, he knows it's only a matter of time. The clock is ticking. The walls are closing in, and sooner or later he will be behind bars. All of that's accurate. Your Honor, they're saying our client knows what's coming and that he's going to be behind bars. Mind you, in his bail hearing, we said he knew this was coming in January, and we tried to work with you to not have him end up behind bars, but they just can't be out there saying this. I am stunningly not persuaded. It goes on to say these lawyers are, by their own admission, in communication with the government about their clients acting as potential witnesses. I'm not shocked by that at all. It quotes another TMZ article saying accuser's lawyer claiming intimate knowledge of federal investigation, suggesting that her client was not, quote, the first, the second, the seventh, or the ninth person meeting with the government, and that, quote, there is a finish line to the government's investigation, and we kind of came in at the end of it. Then they also cite back to the press conference, lawyer for accusers stating that some of the clients have already spoken to the government. That's just true, though. They go on to say, in addition, to the extent the government has directed or authorized such extrajudicial statements, contrary to its own obligations to ensure a fair trial, we request the court direct the government not to disclose such communications. We want the government to disclose who all of their witnesses and victims are, but we don't want them to disclose any communications. They go on to say, finally, this request is time sensitive. Each day that passes brings a fresh wave of publicity, often at the direction of the accusers and their counsel, further prejudicing Mr. Combs' right to a fair trial. Footnote 4. Therefore, we respectfully request that any response be filed on October 30th, 2024, which is the date for the other motions. So we'll probably hear both these motions mid-November. And then footnote 4 says, in an entire paragraph, indeed, in the last week alone, counsel for one accuser has appeared for interviews vouching for her client's credibility in connection with patently false and grossly prejudicial allegations. Although the government is in possession of documentary evidence demonstrating that Mr. Combs was not present anywhere near the accuser on the date in question, the government has done nothing to quell the proliferation of these inflammatory false reports, nor has it even responded to Mr. Combs' request that the government direct its witnesses to refrain from making inflammatory statements to the press. That is the footnote. And that is the end of the request for a gag order. There are limits to what can be said pre-trial, and prejudicial publicity can be a tremendous problem. For Combs, he has the criminal case ongoing and the civil cases ongoing. Civil cases play out publicly quite a lot. Criminal cases, even when they try to keep it quiet, if they are of interest, then people will be talking about them no matter what is done. On this, I think the shit's out of the horse. And with Diddy behind bars and likely staying that way, people are going to say what they have to say. And a lot of them are saying it in civil lawsuits. I imagine we are going to continue to see day by day more civil lawsuits coming forward and more accusers coming forward. Sean Combs will have his day in court, but he's not going to be able to control what people are saying about him. And his lawyers are only going to be able to do so much because it seems that the government, though not trying to stem the tide, because what the government asked for in a press conference is if you know something, if something happened to you, if you witnessed something, come forward and tell us. Yes, going to the government before going to the press is a good idea, but you can't tell people that they cannot speak about what happened to them, and what witnesses choose to say or not say can come up when they are cross-examined. What lawyers can say and cannot say before trial is different. And let me know if I'm being too harsh on this, because maybe I am, but Diddy's lawyers had no problem standing up in press conferences, in multiple bail hearings and filings, trying to absolutely trash victim one in this case and say that she had 30 million reasons why she was saying the things she did. They said that this was a relationship and that she has a financial motive for everything she's saying. So they're going to go out and say that, and then now want everyone to be quiet. You're not going to get to have it both ways. And we'll see what the court does with all of this. Probably in mid-November, we're going to see argument because the government's responses are all due on October 31st. And I will hopefully have a week or two where we are not talking about fucking Diddy. But I don't know if that's going to happen. This one, we had a lot to catch up on. Hopefully you're keeping up with me in trial on your Law & Order app over on the YouTubes. And I have to go get some sleep after recording this because tomorrow I will be in court again for the Sarah Boone case. So with that, thank you for being here. Thank you for being a Law & Order. Please stay hydrated. May your Wi-Fi be strong so you can stream court all day with me. May your toilet paper be plentiful. May your families be well. And may the odds be ever in your favor. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a Law & Order. And I will see you in the next one. You can stay up to date with everything I'm covering on our free iOS and Android app at lawnerdapp.com, or search your app store for Law & Order. And you can also follow me on social media at The Emily D. Baker. Remember, I stream on YouTube on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I recap all of that for you in quick bits on Monday. And of course, The Emily Show drops on Wednesdays. Thanks for being a Law & Order.